Barbara, your turn.
So my question is, what if, and you may be going here, what if you only are using the internet for talking to your devices? Oh, I mean, Skype. If you're only using wireless talking to your other devices.
Well, that's a good question. Let's talk about that. What a great segue. So let's focus on the wireless piece of that. So there's been a lot of standards over the years as things have improved. So it's all the 802.11 series, or the 802 series. And so in 1997, the original .11 came out, which is now obsolete. Nobody uses that anymore. So in 1999, it got enhanced to 11A. It was a little bit faster, and they started using the 5 gigahertz range instead of the 2.5. And that was what the 11B came out with. So basically, we had 2 different frequency ranges you could work with. 5 is nice if it works, but it's also a little more prone to attenuation, walls, metallic things, degrade the signal more quickly. And so that's why you have the 2 frequencies. 2.5 propagates a little bit better, goes a little further, goes through things a little bit better, but there's a lot of devices out there using it. And so the nice choice, it's nice to have the choice, because if you can use 5 and it works for you, you're less likely to have interference. But it's good to have 2.5 available if you need to. But it's also good to know, what your devices support. And we'll talk about that in a bit more. In 2003, they came along and came up with a much faster 54 megabits per second that's still working in the 2.5 gigahertz range. Several years ago, they came out with a 802.11n. It operates on both 2.5 and 5 gigahertz, which is really kind of nice. And you can have a range of throughput, just kind of depending. There's 4 channels available to it, and if you can grab all 4 of them at once, if you don't have other devices out there, you can have up to 600 megabits per second honking through there. So I mean, it's a really nice standard. But I was playing with this at my mom's house, because I don't have 802.11 at my house. I only have crummy AT&T service. And I was trying to watch some TV over UVerse, which I can do on my devices, but it wouldn't let me watch it because I didn't have enough channels available. And so, but then later on, when Kathleen had turned some of her stuff off, when my mom wasn't doing anything anymore, all of a sudden I had enough channels and I could watch TV again. So it's kind of twitchy, and it's almost magical. But at least it's nice that under certain circumstances you can really have high definition TV on your wireless devices if you have enough channels available to you. And then there's a new kid on the block, 802.11 AC, which promises up to as much as 800 plus megabits per second. Now this is a relatively new standard. You're not going to see much support for it yet, but newer devices are. I thought I had that. For example, iPhone 6 will now support that. iPhone 5s didn't. So the newer devices that are coming out and are starting to support these newer standards. So if a device supports the newer standards, typically they're backwards compatible. But if you have multiple devices, different wireless hubs and different devices, you're going to kind of be stuck at the lowest common denominator. And so which one of these protocols your device happens to have in it may limit the throughput that you get in any particular network.
And also, does that depend on the service that you're getting from the provider?
It only depends in so much in the box that you're getting. Since they're providing your wireless hub, you only get the protocols they support, which AT&T is not doing a great job of. I'll show you that in a minute too. So I mentioned the 2.5 gigahertz, the 5 gigahertz thing. So for example, if one of your devices is operating on and only supports 802.11, and you have another device that only supports 802.11.b, they can't talk to each other because they're operating in completely different frequencies, and there's just no way they can communicate with each other. So that's why at least being aware of what these different standards kind of imply is important if you're having trouble and stuff just isn't working. So in some circumstances, if you're having issues, you may have to start digging out some manuals to say and read the fine print and see what does it support and what doesn't it, and why is this not working. So frequency is important. If you have a device, as I just said, that's on a frequency that isn't supported by the device you're trying to connect to, or vice versa, they're not going to talk. Standards are also important. Typically your hubs, like I said, if they're at a higher standard, they'll dumb down, unless somebody has gone in and configured the hub to say, don't. You can go in as an option and say, I only want to support this or these options and ignore anything else. Unless you've gone in and done that yourself, that's not likely to happen. But if you're visiting somebody or somebody's been in there messing with it, that may be a reason why it's not working as well. That 802.11 AC hub sounds great, but if you don't have a device that operates on it, it's going to be a while before you're going to be able to take advantage of that. So the iPhone 6 is the only thing that I've seen so far that does support it. But you'll see these things all over Fry's and stores like that. They're really trying to push you to get the higher speeds. It's good for the future, but it may not do you much today. So again, like when I was trying to watch TV, I needed a higher bandwidth than I had available to me at Mom's house, and so it should have worked, but it didn't, and it was just kind of interesting to try to figure that out.
And what were you trying to watch it on?
Just my iPhone. I was just trying to, basically I was just playing with it to see what I could see while I was out of town. I think we're trying to get to I think the baseball playoffs are going on at that time. And it turns out they're blacked out of region anyway, so even over that. But, in that case, that taught me if I had several devices in the house all trying to get in at the same time, you kind of have a bit of a collision there, and there wasn't enough bandwidth in the device to go around to everybody. So shut off some stuff and maybe you'll be able to make it work. And, I'm a little upset with AT&T because I was one of the first people to have UVerse installed in Dallas. I was one of the manager for the company at the time, and so I got to be a trial case, and it was really pretty cool. But I'm stuck with an old hub. And it doesn't support 802.11. Mom's Verizon hub, which has been newer, does. So she's got much faster wireless links available to her and to people in her house than I do in mine. So as you're shopping for hubs, if you're in the market for it, I'm certainly a much more educated consumer than I was a few months ago. I've got a lot of questions I want to ask now, because it's a real hassle to go back to AT&T and say, I'd like to replace my hub, and they'll say, well, is it broken? It's like, well, it could be, and yeah, it's broken. Then they'll send me another one of these.
Oh, well, Tony, I had a year ago email or a note from Verizon saying, you're such a good customer, we're going to upgrade your speed for free, because they've been charging.
Your wireless speed or your wired connection speed?
Wireless.
Okay.
I don't know. Whatever. And so, anyway. And they said, however, to use this speed, you need a new hub. Your hub is really old. Yeah, it is. So for $100, you can buy a new hub. I did. It's a good deal. The other thing is, though, the hub that was attached there belongs to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to keep it. And whenever I could do away with that service, then I have to give them that hub back.
They didn't want you to send it back to them?
No, they didn't want me to send it back.
Huh.
I'd like to send it back.
I'll bet you would.
Get it out of my house, I'll probably forget where it is.
I think I can do a similar thing. I think I can pay $100 and get a newer, faster hub.
And it may have been a different price, though. It wasn't much.
But that's what I'm going to have to do if I want to.
The fact that they're not providing service is irrelevant to them?
They're providing service, but I mean, at the time this hub was manufactured, 11.n was a newer, newer Wi-Fi service, and it just wasn't something they supported.
So unless you speak up, they'll never upgrade your...
They haven't so far.
They didn't offer you a faster speed at a higher price, even?
No, not yet.
And that's always kind of been an option with Verizon. You could get faster speed. I think now I'm getting a faster speed. I didn't pay for that. I'm also getting HBO until the end of January free.
Cool.
I'm having a little trouble hearing you.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. What were you saying?
I said that Verizon was charging for a faster speed. And then all of a sudden they offered to give me the faster speed free. Of course, I had to buy a new hub. And then they just recently offered me HBO until the end of January free. I haven't watched anything yet, but I think they're trying to get people to subscribe to HBO, I guess.
I would think so.
So how can you tell what the gateway, what the speed is at the gateway?
You'd have to get that test software that I mentioned a few slides ago and actually just, run some tests.
Okay.
So your hub location, it's a radio signal, and so where you put that hub is actually going to affect how well your signal is going to propagate. So, just kind of as a general rule, the higher you can put it, the better your signal is going to propagate. You want to try to put it like in the center of where you're going to use it. So, if, like in my case, I've got an L-shaped house. It's a bad idea to put it on one end of the house because it's probably not going to propagate well to the other. Remember that walls are going to diminish your signal. Metal is going to diminish the signal as well. Electrical devices may cause some problems. So just keep those thoughts in mind when you're figuring out where it is that you're going to place this residential gateway to give you the best RF coverage for your application and your house. So if you have other RF devices, if you have wireless phones, for example, it's probably a pretty bad idea to put the wireless phone right next to your residential gateway because they can't interfere with each other. Bear in mind that your older wireless devices may not support some of the newer, faster standards. So if you've got an iPad 1, I'm not sure anymore what standards it supports, but it may not support some of the faster stuff. That's one of the disadvantages of having something where it's all integrated like an iPad or an iPhone. You can't just, like the clunker PC like I have, I can take a card out, put another card in, and speed things up. You can't do that so well on an iPad. And the farther you're away from the wireless hub, the more the signal is going to diminish. And so, closer is better if you're trying to have a good signal. I mentioned some other Wi-Fi services that are coming online that are really kind of interesting. Now, this isn't really so new, but you can have a wireless printer. And so if your printer has the ability to have something that generally has to be built into it, you can attach your iDevice wirelessly to that printer. You can pair them up, and so you can print right from your iPhone, right from your iPad, or wirelessly from your laptop device if you want, and not actually need even to have a fixed cable connection. So that's one thing. But the Internet of Things is really kind of interesting. I was playing on Yahoo, and trending on that day, the Internet of Things was #1. So no photoshopping out. That actually happened on October 21st. So the future is now. So the Internet of Things is just a network of physical objects accessed through the Internet. These objects contain embedded technology to Internet with internal states or with the external environment. So you may hear this referred to as M2M, machine to machine, instead of P2P, people to people. So, paranoid, you can set up your own wireless home alarm. Go to Fry's, they'd be happy to sell you any one of about half a dozen kits that you can use to set up and make your home more secure. You can buy all kinds of devices and attach them to it. You can even control your lights. So you don't have to physically walk up to the switch anymore. You can control it that way. And again, there are all kinds of devices that you can buy to enable this and make your home more wired and more connected if you want to. You can even control your thermostats. This is my favorite toy, Nest. So I can control my thermostat from anywhere in the world from my iDevice. These are pretty cool too because they also do what's called learning. So as you adjust them, I'm hot, turn it up, I'm cold, turn it down. They take that into account and start adjusting the program to match, whether you're hot or cold. And they're really interesting devices, but wirelessly connected. This was kind of interesting. They're actually selling this little egg that monitors carbon monoxide and nitrous oxide values in the air. It's a very something that's very much of concern to people who are concerned about global warming and other environmental issues. And so for about $185, you can participate in this. You can buy one of these devices, set it outside your house, and then it does little micro measurements and forwards your measurements to the researchers around the world. So they get very precise, very small, and very many measurements of these levels around the world. And you can see on the map and drill and see where all these devices are. This was an interesting one, glow caps for your pills. When it's time to take a pill, the cap will start flashing to say, it's time, it's time, it's time. So anyway, those are just some of the ones as I was kind of perusing through the internet that there's some very clever people that are putting some interesting applications out there to use this wireless capability in our homes. Yes, Barbara?
I haven't purchased this yet, but I considered it. There's a scale called RF, and you can sound the scale and it transmits your weight, your body mass index, your body fat, some other things through your home network
Yeah, so you're going to increasingly see more and more things like this that are using, your wireless network in your home to tie in. So it's not quite the smart refrigerator they were talking about for so many years, but it is interesting to see some of the applications they're coming up with. So, and this is where it starts getting dangerous. You can do some things to modify your network if necessary. So one of the problems I had was I didn't have a strong enough signal back in the back end of the house, which was making my wife unhappy, which made me unhappy. So you can add a second Wi-Fi hub to your network, and then essentially you then have two of them. So I now have one kind of in the middle of the house, and I have one in the back of the house, both tied to the same network and greatly extending the range of my signal. So, I'll talk generally about how you do this, but you want to keep it so that this primary device is the one that assigns the IP addresses and manages all your wired nodes, and attach this one in such a way that it just basically manages the wireless nodes but still lets us kind of run the network. And you'll see what I mean by that in just a slide or two. Exactly how you would do this just depends on a lot. It depends on who your provider is and what it is you're trying to attach. But if you just Google, add second Wi-Fi router and then the vendor and the model, like Netgear or whatever, you'll get a lot of hits and a lot of suggestions on how you can do it, and step by step for that model of how to do it. But particularly, I found the ones that were how to add my Netgear thing to an AT&T network, and then I went down and just kind of going through there. But basically, you're just assigning it a static IP address. Remember I was talking earlier about how you can do that. This just makes it so that it's not getting a new IP address every time I reset the network. Use the same SSID, that's the name of your network. So mine's 2-wire or something, so I just gave it the same name as my router. Turned off its DHP server, and just connected it to the existing LAN port, plugged in, and now everybody's happy. So, as you go through all of the instructions that you find, basically that's just what they're walking you through and the specifics for your particular device on how to do it. So that's one way you can do it. You can also buy some purpose-designed specific things. I saw this ad in Fry's the other day. So they sell these devices where you just basically plug them into your AC outlet. I believe you have to do a little bit of the configuration along the lines of what I just talked about, but that's what this thing is designed to do, is to rebroadcast your Wi-Fi signal for you. So there's lots of devices like this that you can buy that are intended to do just exactly what I've said.
And that one wouldn't need to be wired then? The first one did need to be
Correct.
wired?
Right.
Okay.
This one apparently receives the signal and then retransmits again. I didn't really.
Boost at some point.
Yes, or receives it and then transfers. There's many channels that are available in your home network for you to use. And so what I'm assuming these things are doing is receiving on one channel and transmitting on a different, so there's no conflict. But read the instructions, and I'm sure they'll get you through. Now this is where it gets really dangerous. You can actually get into your residential gateway and start doing great damage. Now for the AT&T ones, they at least give me the IP address and tell me what the system password is. I got this kind of blanked out because I don't want you to know. But I can actually go into my PC, connect to that address, and seriously mess up my network if I'm not careful. But it gives me this nice little menu-driven ability to go in and see what's going on with my residential gateway and start doing things to it. So, it tells me, what my SSID is, the type of authentication I have, network key, which I've changed for you, and some other stuff. And as you go through those various tabs, you can see and can make modifications to various things about your network. Now, in reading some of the security stuff, they say that you might want to consider changing the SSID, the name of your network, and I'll show you why that's probably not a bad idea. You might want to consider changing your Wi-Fi password. Yours is probably written on the side of your device. One common way that people get in is just by guessing those things. And so the longer and more complicated your password is, the harder it's going to be for somebody to guess. So the things I've been reading suggest making it longer, like up to 16 characters, and more complicated, including upper and lowercase letters, numbers, and special characters. Although how you remember all that to type it in, I don't know, but make it secure. Nobody can get in there, I guess. And you want to make sure that you're using WPA2 PSK with AES. That's kind of the current most strong standard that you can use for your authentication. You definitely want to avoid the initial one, WEP, because that one, shortly after it came out, somebody hacked it and figured out how to break into it. And so it's maybe about half a nanosecond better than having no security, but not much. So, you know, you definitely want to make sure that you are not on web, and you want to be on something more secure and more modern than that. Now, hopefully, if you know, fortunately for me, AT&T already set that up for me. Verizon did that for you. I think that most, you know, providers are going to have you set up on that by default, but not a bad thing to check just to be sure. I would approach this last one with a great degree of caution. You can change, you know, the default password. Just make sure you don't forget it, because the only option to get around that is to push that little reset button and take it back to factory default, which might really goof things up. But those are some reasons why you might want to, with a great degree of caution, get into your device and actually start poking around. So I would, again, don't sue me if you do it or screw things up, but you can if you want to. I mentioned changing the SSID. Why might you want to do that? Well, you can buy little things like this. I've got one on my PC now. This is the Airport Utility app, and I can see all of the wireless devices within range of my iPhone. Now, knowing that every AT&T device in the world starts with 2-wire gives me a great advantage if I'm a hacker looking for a system to break into. I right away know that's an AT&T 2-wire device, and that gives me a huge leg up if I'm a bad guy trying to sneak into your network. You know, even knowing it's a Cisco. So one of the things some of the security experts suggest that you might want to do to make life a little more difficult for people is to change that name to something a little more obscure. You know, I saw one in there that's kind of cool, as something like FBI or something like that. I thought, okay, at least you're being clever. You know, now I'm not sure what kind of a vendor and model it is. But you know, these kinds of tools and people driving around trying to do some malicious things are real, unfortunately. And so, you know, all the stuff that I'm reading about how to be more secure just says, make it as difficult as you possibly can. Don't make it easy for people. And so if somebody's trying to do something bad in your neighborhood and they can't tell immediately from this kind of a list what type of device you have, they're going to find somebody that they can, and they're going to hack them. So just kind of food for thought. Now, if you're really, really, really adventurous, you can actually go in and basically disable either the router or the hub portion of your residential gateway and use your own stuff. And I've not been adventurous enough to this. I know people that have, and they do swear by it. And so it's a very kind of similar. And again, generically, you know, it's very similar to adding the wireless repeater. You know, so if you're doing this, you're going to set your router to use DHCP to get its IP address from your ISP device. Plug your router into it, reboot it so it gets its local IP address. There's something called a DMZ list, a demilitarized zone, and that just kind of extends the umbrella protection from what the service provider's router is doing for you down into your device, and extends some security to your network. And then, you know, assuming you've done everything right, now you've kind of disabled their router and turned on your router. Now, why might you want to do that? Well, if you don't want to pay Verizon or AT&T $100 to buy theirs, you know, you might be able to go buy one, you know, either more powerful, more in suiting for what you're looking for, or less money or whatever. You know, this would be the route that you would go. There's some other things that you would have to do as well. I don't think any of you here tonight are going to be doing to that. But again, like if I would, you know, unless you're really, really, really a geek and into this stuff, this is not anything I would recommend doing lightly. I just kind of feel, since I've been reading about it, I want to share with you that it is at least a possibility, and it's something that you can do if you really want to live dangerously. And this is really the big reason for it. There are about 3 major versions of software, public domain software, that are out there that you can load into this router and do some really powerful stuff with. But again, it takes a lot of knowledge to understand what you're doing here. But if you're really, really into security, really into performance, and you really want this thing to be, you know, as secure as it can be and as high performance as it possibly can be, this is where you're going to want to be playing. You know, you'll disable the provider's router, enable your own, download some of the software, and then just go crazy. I'm not there. And I don't think I'm going to be anytime soon, but I just, like I said, I wanted to mention it to you because it is something that people are doing. Another thing I read about too is that these devices, actually in the picture, mine has this one. I went to look at it in real world. I don't even have that USB connector. My mom's Verizon does. But you can attach a USB attached disk drive directly to your residential gateway and make it accessible and available to all the devices that are using your network. So that's kind of a cool thing. There's a couple of concerns though. Well, we'll come back to that in a second. My device only supports USB 2. You think I'm making an ad for Verizon. They support USB 3. Now what's the difference there? Well, USB 2 is the older USB standard. It's only good to about 480 megabits per second, and it's half duplex, which means I can send one way or I can receive, but I can't do both simultaneously. USB 3 is much faster at about 5 gigabits per second and full duplex, so it can transmit and receive at the same time. So USB 3 is a much faster port and much more desirable. And you can tell USB 3 because they have these little blue things in them that the USB 2 ones don't have. So that's the difference if you're looking at them. I may have left off one slide. The thing about putting a USB device on your residential gateway is it's pretty cool, but if anybody does happen to hack into your Wi-Fi and get access into your network, it's pretty easy then to gain access to the files on that drive and have access to them as well. So I would approach that with a bit of caution. I'd also be concerned if all you can do is connect at a USB 2 speed, because that's pretty slow. So I would want to either a Verizon service or a newer AT&T router before I would do that. But it's still not a bad idea, particularly if you either encrypt the files out there or just put stuff out there that you don't want to make your files freely available, but just don't put your your personal finance and your medical and stuff like that. But vacation pictures that you want to share and stuff like that, why not? But again, it's just another thing that is a possibility that you could do if you wanted to expand some of the features on your residential gateway. And then I'll just close up by mentioning, think a little bit about your power considerations for these things. At a minimum, you want to have a good surge protector. You also might want to consider a UPS, a device that will actually, with a battery in it, so that if you lose power, it'll keep your residential gateway running for a while. And that's really nice if you get short little, hicks in power. Won't help you if, like, last month I had 5 days, my USB was out of, or my hub was out of service after about 4 hours. It just didn't last that long. But all of your computer equipment, it's a really good idea to protect this way. Just bear in mind, nothing's going to protect you from a direct lightning strike, no matter what they say on the surge protector thing. If lightning hits your line and hits your house, it's going to take out a bunch of stuff. So if you got really, really close lightning in your area, I'm starting to get paranoid and shutting stuff off and unplugging it. But surges will protect you from nearby stuff and from glitches in it. So we just encourage you to have that. So a lot of stuff going on in that closet. That box doesn't look like much, but boy, there's a bunch of things happening in there, and a lot that you want to be concerned about, or at least aware of if you're starting to hook stuff up. So that's my USB device down there. That's what it's all running off of. And I've replaced my hub now because I've got a little faster one for all my stuff, but otherwise that's pretty much what my network looks like. I think, away from the hub there, I'm done. So wake up, click your heels 3 times together and stretch for a minute, and if are there any questions you would like to try for me to answer, I'd be happy to.
I have a minute. All the Wi-Fi you were talking about, cameras and house security and everything, aren't you going to still run into the same problem of not enough capacity to handle all the Wi-Fi requests? Kind of like what you said at your mother's, that there weren't enough channels open?
If you're running up on that 802.11.n1, that's a good question. I'm surely they thought about that. They may not be running they may be running on an older, slower one because there's not really a lot of bandwidth there, and there's really no need for that high bandwidth stuff. And maybe that's how they're doing that, so they get enough ports. I don't know, it's a good question. I don't have a good answer for that. Surely they figured that out, though.
Not that I'm getting ready to go entirely wireless, but
Barbara.
A lot of years ago, back when I had an Apple IIe computer instead of a Mac, that's how long ago it was. I had a device that plugged into my computer, and I plugged plugs into the electrical outlets and the lights into those. And then through the wires of the house, magically somehow, I programmed those switches to turn off and on my lights at a certain time. I got a lot of interference with, I don't know, it's my computer, with other things in the house because of that running through the electrical wires in the house. Do you see that happening with these other devices that plug in to the electrical outlet?
Well, they're not actually using the electrical outlet as the medium for transmitting the signal, so no, they're still using the Wi-Fi
Okay.
to communicate, so probably not.
So they're not using the electricity to do it there?
No. Of all the things that I mentioned that are ways to transmit broadband to, there actually is a very, very small amount of that over power lines. They're actually modulating signals that go. It's not very widely used. I don't think it's going anywhere. So, but you just kind of kick that as a memory too. Apropos of nothing.
You mentioned that UVerse was an example of DSL. So UVerse is not their fiber optic offering?
AT&T doesn't really have a fiber optic offering like Verizon does. So,
'Cause I mean, I get 3 or 4 mailings a day asking me to switch to UVerse, and but I guess I just made an assumption that it was fiber optic, but it's still delivered through your telephone line.
yes, it's fiber to the neighborhood.
Oh.
There's a pedestal somewhere,
Yeah, I've
you know,
seen the sign.
within several thousands of yards of your house, but from there it's just coming over the same twisted pair that your telephone service, was or is coming over.
Oh, okay. Because I have a very old, I don't even know if you call it a network, but at least my computers are connected wirelessly to my printer. But I don't know that I actually have all this stuff yet.
Yeah, the file service is really attractive for someone like me, where I'm dealing with a lot of images and things for the society, and as I'm copying them to various things, that upload limit is it's slow. Files does have a deal where they have 5 or 7 megabits down and up. It's equal, and they do that because they have that fiber and don't have the inherent limit that the twisted pair has. And so, if I lived in Verizon territory, I might be tempted to switch over to that for that reason. That's one advantage. Unfortunately for consumers, though, I don't think Verizon is building that out into other networks. I think they've capped the areas they're serving it in right now, and I don't think they're expanding it anymore, other than where they're already providing it, which is too bad. Because everywhere.
Do you know anybody who has cable and how that works with the network?
It kind of depends on the provider. When you hear stuff, it's more because people are mad.
Yeah, that's true.
And people are complaining more than praising the service that they have. It seems to work pretty well. The problem with cable, just architecturally, is that it's kind of a shared service again. And so if you have a lot of people that are using a lot of data at the time you're on there, it's going to tend to slow down a little bit because you're all using the same physical cables. That's been a drawback of using cable and the architectural issues. So they've had to do a lot of build out to try to get around that. So it just depends on how sophisticated a cable provider's network is and how tuned it is for networking to how well it's going to work. But I really don't see much difference in terms of quality of service between any of the major providers. They all seem to do fairly well. I know I've got a lot of Comcast people in my neighborhood, and so it's all over the map. Some people love it, some people hate it, but they'll say the same thing about AT&T. So.
So you would say the same thing about Verizon also?
Probably. The places I've used Verizon, my sister-in-law has it, my mother has it now. I've been pretty impressed with it. Seems like a really nice service.
You do have to worry about one thing, and that is, if you dig any holes in your yard, be sure you know where that fiber cable goes.
Mm-hmm.
They do not plant it very deep. They just do a shallow, dig a little hole, a little trench, not even a trench.
Oh, okay.
And they lay that cable through there. And my neighbor had a sprinkler system put in. And of course, they tested his yard, put little flags up there, his installer put one pins in my yard and sliced through my cable and it did. So it just came in too far in my yard. So Verizon had to come back, had to come out and relay my fiber.
Yeah, but it's squirrel proof and rain proof.
Are other things not squirrel proof?
Overhead wires, no. Squirrels, overhead wires are not squirrel proof. They'll get in there and chew on them.
Yeah, see, my whole neighborhood is underground, everything, electrical, phone, everything's underground.
Wish mine was.
Yeah.
Not mine.
No.
Yeah, but you're still hooked into another transformer that's up there that's gonna get hit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we still get knocked out.
One of the things I did when I wanted to put some more, I got a new microwave that required more power. And I had a straight line in there, but it really wasn't enough, so I was replacing that, doing some other things. So my house is 30 years old, and decided, well, I'll just go ahead and put a whole new electrical box in, breakers and that kind of stuff. But when we did that, we also put in a surge protector built into that breaker box. So I still got the garage, both devices now. So now, supposedly, I don't have to use them inside.
But like I said, that won't do you any good if lightning hits your line outside your house.
Or have a line outside my house.
That's right, you're in pretty good shape then.
Yeah. Now, if they can hit, like you said, they hit the box up the street.
Or the house itself, yeah.
Well, thank you. I learned a lot.
Well, thank you for being here.
I did too. I don't think I have much of a network.
I'm going to turn some lights on, so everybody close your eyes or blink or something here, so we'll see again. Well, thank you for coming. Hopefully we'll see you all at the awards banquet in December.
Yes.
This has been a presentation of the Dallas Genealogical Society. If you're already a member, thank you. Your membership dues are supporting this and other society activities. If you're not yet a member, I hope you consider joining. You can become a member for as little as $35 a year, and you can join by going to our website, dallasgenealogy.org, and clicking on the membership tab.